And in order for it to really go crazy, I think it would kind of have to be kind of like a Jorge Flores type situation where someone gets something, may or may not, look something that looks bad on camera, even if it's not something that looks bad on camera, that it can then kind of spark that wave.
There are currently protests that are happening over ICE raids in California. Now, these things do happen nationwide. I think the reason why, like we stated earlier, it's riot season because protesters aren't as motivated to get out when it's 20 degrees outside as they are when it's balmy and they're kind of bored and looking for something to do. With, I think, Netanyahu's visit was an exception.
It was pretty cold, though.
Yeah, that was an exception to the whole season thing. But what are your sense, or what is both of your sense as to how much juice is in the left looking to riot? Do you think that they're looking to protest? Do you think that the issues that are probably the most volatile, do you think they have enough to actually become a nationwide phenomenon, or do you think that it's going to be just pockets?
I think it's mainly going to be pockets, but obviously, those pockets are the big cities, right? Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and so because I was in Los Angeles a couple weeks ago covering these protests, and throughout the week, it was mainly high school students who were walking out of school to protest ICE. Now, I know a lot of people kind of like to discount that by saying, oh, they just want us to skip school. And don't get me wrong, I think that was a part of it, especially the one that happened on that Friday. But also, they were Latinos. So, I mean, they do have skin in the game, so to speak, at least in their eyes. And so I think it's still too early, but I mean, it's not unreasonable to assume that once the deportations really start ramping up, which I know people are criticizing the pace right now, but it's only been a month. But once they ramp up, once they start to fully envelop more people than just the hardened criminals, I think at that point, then yes. Because, I mean, you see, like, with the TikTok videos, right? Like, you see people do, like, reporting, like, the sightings. You had that radio station out in, I think, San Francisco giving out, live reports on what this is, ICE is in this neighborhood at the street. So the resistance is certainly there. I think and in order for it to really go crazy, I think it would kind of have to be kind of like a Jorge Flores type situation where someone gets something, may or may not, something that looks bad on camera, even if it's not something that looks bad on camera, that it can then kind of spark that wave. But I mean, 2020 was just really unique because it was an election year. There was that COVID background to it, and then it's no coincidence that it popped off in May, like at the end of May, right? So, just from my point of view, it is going to be a movement for sure. It just needs, I think, a little bit more time to kind of build up any sort of steam in order to have any sort of significant impact in places like New York City or Chicago.
Richie, you're always on the ground too. So do you feel the same kind of energy in the protests that you've been to, say, in the past 2 years leading up to the recent election of Donald Trump? Because one of the things that I think that the president does matter. There's a lot of people on the far left that were very comfortable calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe and stuff. But I feel like that element is a constant. And I think that you need some kind of motivation for people that are more loosely affiliated with politics to get them involved. Yeah. So what's your sense about
so Julio, were you out in front of the Columbus statue at Union Station over the summer?
Yeah, I saw you.
Yeah, okay. I say,
like, I thought you retired.
But that was the biggest, like, anti-Netanyahu, anti-Israel protest, or Palestine protest of that year. And that was pretty crazy. That was almost at 2020 levels. Recently, this winter, after the election, I was at Netanyahu's last visit to the White House, and there were a couple thousand people outside. But actually, what was bigger was the USAID protest that was happening on the same day. It was like twice the size. And the thing that I noticed,
that was protesting Doge, right?
That was Doge protest. It was before the USAID stuff. But that group of people, I've been out at a couple of those protests. And that's a much older crew. So it's like a lot of people who are federal employees. And I was just out there this week for a protest in front of the Capitol. And I was just amazed. I mean, it was a couple thousand people. So it was a sizable protest, but it was a much, much older group. And I think that group is much different from the pro-Palestine, anti-Israel group, which is a lot younger. So I think it depends on what the topic is and what's happening. But I definitely think moving forward, we're going to see protests around immigration, protests around what's going on in the Middle East, Ukraine, and obviously the Doge.
So you guys feel? Do you agree that there might be protests on Ukraine? Now, the fact that you mentioned that is interesting to me because I don't feel like there is a lot of motivation in young people about the Ukraine situation. I mean, granted, how the negotiations go and what ends up happening in Ukraine, it's possible that could change. But it's my sense that it's not a topic that really puts fire in the belly of the young people that are most likely to get out and get the most rambunctious. What's your thought?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to be that might be kind of like you know, it might be at a protest you might see like a Ukraine flag.
Sure.
There of course there's always going to be that one person, right? But in terms of like for a whole movement, I don't see that being like a big catalyst. I mean, look, anything can happen, right? I mean, it's kind of hard. It's hard to predict these things because they're just so chaotic by nature, and that's what makes them fun. But I think the main thing is just going to be that it's going to be mainly focused on immigration, because as we were talking about before we went live, like the Palestinian protests have like really lost steam compared to where they were, because even like so for example, like the DNC. Last year in Chicago, everyone was kind of expecting that to be crazy, and there were moments. Don't get me wrong, but even the turnout was not nearly as big as the protesting groups were projecting. People were guessing. It was people were saying like up to like 100,000, and like I think the busiest was like close to 20,000. Like that was, and I'm not discounting that, but it just shows that at least here in the United States, England is probably a different,
Sure,
different circumstance, just by pure numbers. But like here in the United States, it doesn't have that widespread appeal like BLM did at the beginning. And so, but obviously we have a lot more Latinos here in the United States. So I just purely on a numbers game, and the same thing with Ukrainians. Like we don't have that many Ukrainians. Like the people who are going to care about that are like the people in the Beltway, right? Because the money's being threatened now.
Sure, yeah.
But I don't think they're going to burn down the White House or anything or anything crazy like that. So I think it's going to be mainly focused on immigration.
Don't you think there's some fatigue too? Because everybody's been screaming about Trump as a fascist for the last almost 10 years now. And at this point, it's like it's been a 5-alarm fire for nearly a decade. And at what point, that's one thing that I've noticed as well, is with the Doge protests, people have turned their ire towards people like Elon Musk, because Trump is just not the galvanizing figure that he was during BLM, where
he's not new.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like Elon is now kind of public enemy number one.
I mean, I think that it makes sense that Donald Trump is a known quantity now to most Americans, but I think that the fact that he has such a high approval rating now as well, comparatively.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he has, if you told a Democrat, if you told him 3 years ago, Donald Trump's going to win again, he's going to win with the popular vote, and when he wins, he's going to have an approval rating that is on par with any other Republican, they would have lost their minds and they would have said you're crazy, because they had convinced themselves that he was this unique evil and unique threat. And now with like I said, his approval rating is very, it's normal. It's what you would expect from a normal politician. I don't think that most Americans look at him as, to your point, I don't think most Americans look at him as a threat to democracy or a threat to the United States the way that they used to. Do you think that could change if he does actually become more draconian in his methods, or if he directs the immigration and Homeland Security to become more draconian in their methods surrounding deportations?
Well, define draconian, I guess. So what would you consider?
So everyone that's over a certain age remembers the picture during the Bill Clinton administration where Emilio Gonzalez, I think was his name, and there's a dude literally pointing an MP5 at the father, trying to grab the kid. Everybody remembers that. And that kind of imagery can motivate people.
Yeah.
And in the modern era where everyone has a cell phone, but just because everyone has a cell phone that records video doesn't mean you get an understanding of what's going on, because you look at I think it was Philando Castile that set off the Ferguson, right?
Yeah.
No.
What was his
no,
name?
No, Michael Brown.
Michael Brown.
Michael Brown.
No, I'm sorry, not Fred. I'm thinking the where Rittenhouse was. You were there.
Oh, Jacob Blake.
Oh, Jacob Blake.
Jacob Blake.
Yeah.
Jacob Blake.
Everyone saw that.
Yeah.
Right,
They didn't know the context. They
yeah.
didn't know that he had just committed sexual assault. They didn't know that he was trying to kidnap kids.
Right.
That he had a knife in the car, and they were like, "Oh, that's clearly a bad shoot." Kamala Harris went and took pictures with him.
Yep.
So even
He was
though
tased twice right before the video picked up too. So he was just escaping from the police grasp, but he had been tased twice before that. And
but it was still
you
enough.
You couldn't see that in like that 7-8 second.
Yeah.
video.
No, but it was still enough to basically burn down all of Kenosha.
Yeah.
So is it your sense that we're in a position where a photograph or a video that is misunderstood could set things off the way that they did still?
Yeah, and that's what I was referring to about like calling it like Jorge Flores.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Culture War podcast. We're live every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, so subscribe and come hang out.